when it comes down to decision making in regards to placement for a student with a disability, there are a few things I feel are super important to take into consideration. The first being communication with the family. Getting the input of the family on how they feel about the diagnosis, how they feel about the whole situation in general, how they feel about the placement options. I think this is something that, if discussed with the family, it makes the process a whole lot easier. In addition to speaking to the family, I think it's very important to also get the opinion of the student. Sometimes the student may not be able to advocate for themselves, but in the situations where students are, I think it's very important to get their opinion on the matter, especially because they're going to be going through it firsthand. Also, what I think is important is, what's best for the student academically, but also socially as well. I think sometimes the social aspect is overlooked in favor of the academics, because what's the point of putting a student in inclusion to benefit them academically if they're miserable? It's not fair. It's kind of inhumane. And, especially without the student's input, I don't think it's beneficial at all. And that also goes into, what are the goals for the student? What is expected of the student from the family, from teachers? What does the student expect from themselves? Does the student have any goals or aspirations that can help in the decision-making process for placement? Also, I think it's important to ask critical questions like, was there a proper evaluation for the student's disability? Are they properly labeled? We looked at the case study. It's a perfect example. Students who are English language learners are often mislabeled. It's definitely important to look at before, making a decision for a student. Definitely have to, reevaluate students to double check. Doesn't hurt. And then you also have to, be honest with yourself and look at your colleagues, your coworkers. And it's not to say they may be great people, they may be kind-hearted, but are they great teachers? I think that's something that definitely has to be considered. And if they're not, either work towards enlightening them, helping them get better, professional development, or, advocate for change, advocate for, maybe trying to swap out for better teachers. I don't know. It's easier said than done, but it's definitely something to consider. Because noxious teachers are definitely no good for any students or even other teachers. I also think that even if inclusion is reasonable, going back to the NPR podcast, you definitely have to evaluate the intention of the people suggesting inclusion. You definitely have to evaluate whether they're being genuine or not, or whether it's for other reasons. That's definitely something to look into. And, I'm the type of person that likes to give people the benefit of the doubt. But unfortunately, that's something that has to be looked out for. And lastly, going back to the whole personnel thing, and also finances as well. Can services be provided in inclusion that will ultimately benefit the student? If the school doesn't have the resources, maybe, sometimes it's better just to keep the students in self-contained, or, it depends on a case-to-case situation. But if it's not worth putting a student in inclusion, ultimately what's best for the student is what matters. Obviously it's easier said than done, and it's nuanced, but ultimately I think all it comes down to is what's best for the student.